Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar on promoting yourself with ease and confidence with Adam Schmidt from our Build Your Career webinar series. My name is Michelle Fawn, and I manage our education and professional certification products and services here at the IEEE Computer Society. Each month, we host webinars on vital business skills that will help you excel at your current job and be helpful throughout your career. Topics covered include communication, interviewing tips, personal branding, and effective writing, to name a few. Before we get started, I would like to address some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. Tomorrow, you will receive an email with both the slides and the recording of today's webinar. During this webinar, you can ask any questions using the Q&A box you see on your screen. Adam will answer as many questions as he can following his presentation. If possible, please reference the slides your question refers to. Learning to promote yourself is critical for successful interviews, networking opportunities, and organizations. Gain the confidence you need to build a successful career with the Computer Society. We provide various options for you to connect with professionals from all over the world through conference, technical communities, and local chapters. Additionally, you can access up-to-date career advice from computer experts by visiting our Tech News blog. More information will be shared after the webinar. You can also learn more at computer.org. As mentioned, joining us today is Adam Schmidt, CEO and Principal Coach at Smart Summit Coaching, LLC. Adam has more than 15 years of leadership and consulting experience. He has an exceptional ability to guide others to overcome obstacles. Adam is an international coaching federation and professional certified coach. With that being said, Adam, thank you for presenting today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever this finds you. And unbelievably, here we are at December 14th at the end of 2021 already. The year has flown by, no doubt another year for all of us as we reflect on the gifts that we have and reflect on how important our friends and family are around us. So I hope that all of you find this time as a place to reflect and a time where you can say that 2021 is a year for you where you transition to a better place professionally and personally, notwithstanding some of the challenges we've seen around our spaces. Let's take a little bit of a look into what promoting yourself with ease and confidence means. Michelle mentioned a few things there in her introduction, and we want to reflect today on the importance of talking about yourself. And that is such an awkward thing to do, isn't it? It's really hard to describe to someone else the stuff you're good at and how to weave that into a conversation, right, where you don't sound silly or you don't sound too arrogant or too cocky about who you are. Sometimes it's hard to speak up into those opportunities. And so what we want to do today is talk about why that's really not the focus. The idea here is not necessarily selling ourselves to someone else, but rather sharing our story. And we'll focus on today what to do, what not to do, the value of promoting yourself, and maybe most importantly, this idea of being able to carry your story into the world with you so that people know what opportunities you might present in their personal and professional space. So before we do some of the details of today, before we get to some of the details of today's conversation, we're going to do two quick polls just to get a better sense for everyone of who's in the room. So Michelle, let's push our first poll out here, which is just, what stage in your career are you currently in? Student, PhD candidate, entry-level, team lead, supervisor, manager. If you're known by a different name, that's okay. If you are, some sort of program analyst or something like that, that's okay. Just kind of ballpark where you might be. Just take the next 30 seconds or so and let us know kind of where you're sitting. We'll all get a sense of kind of who's in the room today. And I just get one question from Douglas. It is being recorded today, Doug. Thanks for that good question.
Here's the results.
That's great. Thanks so much. So let's take a look at who's in the room with us today. Looks like self-employed academia are with us. Those are two big spaces, some consultants. A really nice spread today, actually. Not necessarily one or the other. We've got 20% in the other category, and a nice smattering from across the board here. So that's great. Thanks so much for participating in that. We're going to do one more poll. So we've got a nice even curve here, or almost kind of a flat line across who is where. But our next poll is going to be about today's subject. How comfortable are you promoting yourself to others? Very comfortable. You do this all the time. No big deal. Somewhat comfortable. I do it sometimes when maybe I'm really pushed to do it. Hesitant, but on rare occasions. So no, I don't do that unless it's really, really important, like in a direct job interview. And then finally, I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't promote myself. There's no right or wrong answer here today. I just want to get a sense of kind of where we are in the room. Where we are in the room. How comfortable are you promoting yourself to others?
I'll give him a few more seconds.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll click to next slide.
Excellent. Let's see. Yeah, so we got a little bit more of a good bell curve going on here. We're a little bit skewed towards the uncomfortable, do not promote self. So about half our group today is hesitant, but generally uncomfortable. So you're in the right spot, because again, what we're going to try to do today is reframe what it means to promote yourself, and then give you a few tips and tricks and some real clear tools that you can walk away with in just 45 minutes from now on things to help yourself move forward in this space. So again, 10% very comfortable, just a fraction of us today. About a third somewhat comfortable. A larger section, our greatest section, is hesitant, but on rare occasions. And about 20% of us are uncomfortable. So thanks for sharing who's in the room today. And just reflecting on that for a moment, it's great to see that we've got a really diverse group with us here from all different pieces of our professional space, whether that's an emerging student, whether that's a director, a CEO from the C-suite. Let's bring that into our question and answer later, into our discussions. And I welcome questions from all those different perspectives. So CEOs, you might get some insight of what it feels like for a student to need to share with you some of their skill sets. CEOs, you might get some feedback from other members of our group to say, this is what it feels like to hear about your accomplishments from that senior level. So I'll go to the next slide here, and we'll begin discussing what we're going to talk about today. First and foremost, we're going to focus on becoming more comfortable with promoting ourselves. Again, kind of reframing what it means to bring our story into the world. How to do this in things like our interviews, our networking, and within our organization. Again, not to boast, but to simply bring our story into the equation. We'll appreciate that self-promotion is the art of strategically building a professional image, right? Some people call this the art of bragging, if that resonates with you a little bit more. We're going to ensure that those around us know how they can help us and how we can help them. And we're going to learn some skills that will focus on promoting your value, demonstrating confidence, reframing disapproval, and appreciating the passions that we have. As we think about promoting ourselves, it can often be less about the specific skills that we bring and more about sharing the things that we're passionate about. So what energizes me? Oftentimes when I'm working with Michelle and Scott, as we think about what topics we'd like to bring to this audience, the way I tap in to what I want to do for IEEE and for the Computer Society is, what am I passionate about? What are the topics that I'd like to bring forward? Right? So we begin thinking not as ourselves as a set of skills, but as a set of passions that we want to bring into a different space. So again, we're going to focus on becoming more comfortable, appreciate the fact that this is about strategically building a professional image, and then finally learn some skills to do that. So our job today, by the end of our session, is to have a few things written down. I hope that you can find a little Post-it note somewhere laying in your desk, a scrap of paper, maybe some Christmas wrapping paper or some holiday wrapping paper to scribble on. and walk away with a couple of tips and tricks for today's discussion. We'll talk about what is self-promotion first and why is it important, what not to do, a couple of potholes that we might run into, and then how can we self-promote effectively. So what is self-promotion? Right? This is all about giving and sharing information. We're not bragging here, but we are sharing our passions and our gifts with the world. It's an opportunity for us to talk about not what we can do, but what we love, what drives us forward in our professional space, and then illustrating for our listener what that looks like. It's about strategically building our image so that our network knows what's possible for us. We see this all the time in spaces like LinkedIn. We're going to go into detail in about 20 or 25 minutes on how to use LinkedIn to the best of your ability to share what you've accomplished, not necessarily in a braggy way. I'm sure many of us have scrolled through LinkedIn and read something and you get a little bit of a pang in your heart and you're kind of like, oh, that person's really just kind of bragging a little bit right now. I don't think I could do that. We want to remember what that feels like so that when we go to share our stories, we can use some tips and techniques we'll talk about to better communicate our accomplishments. And then finally, self-promotion is an important tool for every professional at every level. So love that we've got such a diverse group with us today because students, this is critical for you as you seek that first job. PhD candidates, as you begin to think about what research support you might need and other areas of academia that you want to reach into. For our CEOs, we want to make sure that we're announcing the successes of our company, which are your own successes, and being able to share how a company is moving forward. For those directors, management analysts, kind of in that mid-management space there, we want to make sure that people know that where you work is a great place to be, or the company you started has a special energy about it, and you want to be able to promote that. So this applies to all people at all levels. It's not just students that need to get a job. It's not just CEOs that need to attract great talent. It applies to all of us. So why is this even important? Why go through the trouble of having a webinar? And Michelle and Scott have organized this thing to share with you all about promoting yourself with ease and confidence. Why is this even important? Bottom line, people aren't going to know how talented and accomplished you are unless you tell them. We cannot rely on others in whole to share our story with the world. Success is options. Success is when we create different spaces for us to move into. It's not a singular job or a singular title or a singular space that we move into. It is options. It says, I wonder what's possible for me in a given professional space. And so as we think about that, we have to communicate what our passions are. We have to communicate what's exciting for us to bring into the world. The worthiest causes won't sell themselves. And those in your professional space who don't know you and who could add value to you and could add value to your space won't know unless you do, right? No one wins if you don't share what you're excited about and you don't listen to what someone else is excited about. Then we just sit too far apart and we're not able to connect. Self-promotion is an important leadership skill, right? So when we get beyond the space of student thinking, when we get outside of your comfort zone and talk about yourself, you learn how to inspire others and engage in your work. Many of us have probably maybe read a book that has inspired us or an article that's inspired us that reflects on someone else's story. Reminded of a book like The Things They Carried, which is the famous story of Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore and how he was successful at this very critical battle in the Ai Drang Valley in Vietnam. And so this book is not a boastful piece from Colonel Moore about how fantastic he was as a leader. It's an inspirational story of courage, of perseverance, of heart, of passion, of love. And so as we reflect on what it means to lead, it's not necessarily bragging, but there is an opportunity for us to share the success stories that we've had to say, this is the type of leadership that I'm associated with. This is the type of professional space that I want to surround myself with. So if we don't share with others who we are and what we love to do, there's no way for them to connect with us to potentially create some synergy. wanted to share with you today the spectrum that you see on your screen now, because there's a lot of fear about going out of bounds when we think about sharing our stories. There's a middle space where we can appear confident, poised, and self-aware if we communicate and promote ourselves with ease and with grace. If we do too little, we may be thought of as reluctant to share, withdrawn from the conversation, introverted from what's happening around us. It's possible that if we go to an interview and we're not able to articulate exactly who we are and what we're passionate about and some success stories around what we've had, we'll leave that interview, and maybe some of you have done this, and you get into your car and you shut the door and you go, oh, I didn't even tell them that I know this particular language to code in. I didn't even tell them that I was willing to travel, and I have traveled a lot before, and I can make my way around, many different countries or anything like that. So we have to plan in our minds the stories that we're ready to tell. And that interviewer might say, it just doesn't seem like John or Jane is a good fit because they didn't articulate really their passions, and I just didn't hear a passion for them around whether it be travel or coding or whatever comes up. If we go the other direction, if there's too much storytelling, if there's too much promotion, this is the space that most of us interpret as kind of the danger zone. We could be perceived as egotistical, arrogant, even boastful. So as we think about the spectrum, we want to end up in the middle space. And notice there's a little bit of latitude there. It's not a single spot on the spectrum. We can shift a little bit depending on what our environment is. Do we need to be a little more humble in this situation? Do we need to be a little louder in this situation? But there's a large space in this middle of the spectrum where we can say, I'm confident in my abilities, I'm poised when I share with you a story, and I'm self-aware of the skills that I offer, and I'm confident in those. It's most often that we perceive others when they promote that they are too far to the right, and we can quickly pass judgment on someone that they're being a little bit boastful, a little bit arrogant, a little bit egotistical. And it's important to remember that as we go through this process today, we're not encouraging behavior that would be perceived that way. This isn't a course on, this isn't like I'm thinking of some sort of, maybe you've heard of the coach Tony Robbins, right? This real big gentleman who's very excited, he's very animated, super energized. He tells you to go out there, take on the world, and you go get it. Go get your dreams. This isn't the space we're in today. The space we're in today, it talks about how do I share with someone else what my skills are, what my passions are, what my gifts are, in a way where they can be appreciated, where they can be heard, where they can be understood by others, but not interpreted as arrogant, boastful, or egotistical. So again, we're going to focus on this middle space today of this spectrum. Okay, a little bit on what not to do. Here are some common pitfalls that we see from time to time. Humility is admirable. Everyone is, I should say most people are really struck by humility. They'll say, oh, wow, we know this person's pretty great, or we've heard this person's pretty great, but it's so admirable. Look how quiet they are. Look how soft-spoken they are about their accomplishments. But we also don't want to hide from opportunities to shine. We don't want to hide from opportunities to step forward and say, I do know a little something about this particular project. I do know a little bit about how to engage with the nonprofit sector or whatever the conversation might be. If someone asks for information from you or an answer that requires you to reveal positives, it's important that we oblige. It's important that we say, I'm ready to say this out loud. I'm ready to share with you what my skill sets are. It would be a professional misstep when asked about our skill sets to not be prepared to share what they are. And I'll talk about, for a moment, one of the ways to bring language to this space, because I know it can be difficult to articulate what your skills are. So before we talk about humble bragging, which we all know about, I'll do a quick plug, and I've done this in another webinar having to do with emotional intelligence, for a very inexpensive book called StrengthsFinder 2.0. It's from the Gallup Corporation, and it's written by a gentleman named Tom Rath. StrengthsFinder is about $14 on Amazon. You can go buy it, and in the back of that book, there's a little code to input at strengthsfinders.com. And you take a very quick assessment. Usually takes about, 10 minutes, sometimes even less. And what this assessment does is it gives you your top 5 strengths out of 29 that this particular author, this particular company has identified as some of the key attributes we see among professionals in the workplace, some of the key characteristics of character and strengths. And what this will do is help you begin building language around your strengths and your skill sets. For example, you might learn that you're a connector. You might learn that you're disciplined. You might learn that you're focused. You might learn that you're an ideator. You might learn that you're a maximizer. These are all tools or words that you can learn more about as you reflect on the book. I realize that it can be very difficult if you've never gone through this exercise before to learn about how to talk about yourself. And the StrengthsFinders book is probably the cheapest, almost free way to sort of reflect on what words do I use when someone says, Alice, tell me what you're really good at. Tell me what you're passionate about. This book provides us a way to articulate some of those things and bring language into the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about humble bragging. We've covered what not to do in the humility space. Don't humble brag. Boasting masked by a complaint or boasting masked by a little bit of a curtain over what you really want to share. It might sound like I'm so tired of being the only person that the boss trusts. I can't believe I got this award. Big surprise. Really interesting. I didn't know I had written one of Amazon's top 10 books of the year. Really unexpected. We have a really good sense of what it means when someone has said, we have a really good sense, a detector, if you will, a meter, when someone is really just trying to share an accomplishment, but they're awkwardly veiling it behind something else. We pick up on it very quickly, and it's even worse than if we had just shared the skill or the passion outright, or the accomplishment outright. What we want to make sure we do is not necessarily offer anything veiled by a story or veiled by an awkward sort of hidden compliment, but just share our passions outright. Talk about how proud you are to have been one of the top 10 books on Amazon, and how energized, excited, and passionate you are about the topic. We love hearing from people what excites them. We love hearing from people what they're passionate about, and we remember it. We love hearing from people what their strengths are. What we don't like hearing is, I didn't even know I was in the running for this and I won. It's difficult to swallow, right? It's difficult to hear that because we get the sense that the person might not be 100% authentic or genuine. So those are a couple of things to avoid. Humility, and we talked about using StrengthsFinder, and we talked about humble bragging, this idea of a boast masked by a complaint, and how you're better off just sharing what your passion or skill sets are. Let's get into the business of tools of the trade. There's 5 that I'd like to go through, and if you've got that sticky note or wrapping paper nearby to scribble some ideas down on, I'd like you to try to pull just one idea from each of these 5 spaces. I'll offer a couple of examples in each of these, and maybe you can write down one that sounds reachable for you or accessible to you in the coming weeks, in the coming months, as you want to make a move to improve your self-promotion. Okay, first off, understanding our audience. We've got to know who we're trying to send a message to. If we're promoting ourselves, is it to LinkedIn and the entire world? Is it to a specific person in an interview? Is it to a small team you're working with, where you want to share your skill sets? We want to be mindful of who the audience is, because our story needs to be relevant to them, right? We need to determine what specific accomplishments we want to decide to share with them. If we're not strategic in what we share, we could miscommunicate our experience. If we don't think about what type of skill this person is interested in hearing about or passion they might be interested in hearing about, we could misfire and end up telling someone about how great you are in one area when that has nothing to do with the space that they're interested in hearing about. So in this space, in understanding your audience, we want to try to remember who we're trying to reach to, what you want to communicate, where you want to do it, and when you want to say it. And as we think about that, that would be as simple as an interview, right? So let's just kind of put that hat on for a minute. Who am I trying to reach? I'm trying to reach this person who's interviewing me. I want to communicate that I'm a really great team builder, right? I'm a great cohesive team builder. Where am I going to do it? In the interview. When am I going to say it? I'm going to say it during the interview process. And now I need a story to go along with it, right? Something to illustrate the fact that I am a team builder. It might be, for 3 years I worked with Michelle and Scott on developing different webinars, and we created a dozen different webinars, and they went to so many hundreds of people. And this is a way where we can communicate a passion and skill set without getting buried behind humble bragging and knowing my audience, where I really appreciate who I'm sharing some information with. If we fail to do that, we're going to be talking to no one, right? If we don't get specific around what we're offering, we'll be talking to no one. This happens all the time on LinkedIn, where those who have not taken the time to understand their audience are offering something. As we scroll through that homepage, right? As we scroll through LinkedIn, we'll see things that we're not sure why someone is offering a piece of information. We're not sure why someone is reaching out to us about a certain thing. So they have to be specific, and they have to be targeted in who their audience is. This is a big one we'll spend a few minutes on here, promoting value, not yourself. When we think about promoting ourselves with ease and confidence, I've said a few times now, it's not about selling yourself, right? It's about selling your passion, selling your energy, selling the things that you can do on behalf of this organization that you might want to be a part of, or on behalf of what your company can bring to another company. We're unlikely to get noticed, let alone hired in this example, if you don't talk about your achievements, no matter how uncomfortable that is for you. So we do have to kind of put our head down here and remember that spectrum and say, I know there's a safe space in this spectrum where I won't be perceived as arrogant. I don't want to be perceived as overly humble or too quiet about a certain subject. I'm ready to step into the light. Accordingly, talk about specific projects and the work you've done. Right? So we want to get our stories focused on the work. We can push it away from us and talk about how great our team was. Talk about how great our team's success was. How you led a team that accomplished a certain thing. We can begin to separate ourselves from some of the discomfort by saying, well, there was a whole group of us that developed this new web page that is really beautiful. And I was so proud to be a part of that team and to lead the graphics portion of that work, or whatever it might be. So in doing so, we have to quantify our results. It's important to talk about our key successes with metrics and specific numbers to say how I've done something. That's kind of a general note for both promoting ourselves and also things like resumes. I'm sure many of you have heard that tip before. Make sure you're quantifying on your resume so we know how many people you've impacted, how many classes you've delivered, how many different programs you've written, whatever the case might be. When we think about promoting our value and not ourself, the biggest concept here is just to separate the discomfort that we might feel in talking about us. As I say that, I'm pointing at myself versus talking about the value and skills I offer, which I'm kind of pointing in front of me now. The things that are on my desk, the things that are around me are the value that I bring. the thoughts that I might bring, the thought leadership I might bring to a certain professional space, for example. So think about promoting your value, not yourself. Recommendations. There's an opportunity here, and it doesn't work by itself. It is a component of promoting yourself with ease and confidence. We can do this on LinkedIn, for example. It happens pretty automatically. Some of you have probably seen some of the, at the bottom of the page there's an opportunity to say, get a recommendation from Ben or get a recommendation from Sally about a certain skill set. I'd encourage you to begin thinking about getting those and asking others for feedback. And there's always opportunities, of course, to just reach out to people and say, hey, would you mind writing a blurb maybe for my website on the success that we had together? Would you mind writing one in general? So there might be a quote that I can put on my resume and share what success we had in this particular business space. So the more people we can get to campaign on our behalf, the stronger our brand is. These recommendations serve as data points for others to say, look at what's happening with Adam, look at what's happening with Alice. It looks like there's a lot of support. All of us do this in another part of our life. I'm probably not alone before I go to a restaurant, I check out the reviews. I might go to Yelp, I might go to Google, I might go to TripAdvisor, one of these places that aggregates lots of great data. Amazon comes to mind, right? They have those 5 stars in the corner of every product, and then they say that 50,000 people have loved this toy for their kid or whatever it might be. Those are recommendations, right? There are data points for us to assess the value against what we're about to purchase, and it's no different with people. It's no different when we ask a colleague to say, would you mind sending a supported recommendation for this opportunity for me? Would you mind, for example, if Michelle knows a person who I'm interviewing with, Michelle, would you mind sending a, informal recommendation on my behalf just to say that, hey, I've known Adam for a few years, seems like a nice guy, does really great work. I hope the interview goes well. That goes a long way. And that's also promoting yourself through a request for a recommendation. So as you begin to make moves in your professional career, whether it's starting your own business, whether it's looking for a new job, whether it's trying to attract people to your firm, getting third-party recommendations is a really powerful way for people to get data, to collect data on what you're offering without you even saying a word directly to the recipient. Reframing disapproval. We all know this story. Not everyone loves the way we work. Not everyone loves the work that we've done. There's always going to be some people who don't like what you do or how you do it. The more well-known you become, the more criticism you're likely to attract. If you write a book, people are going to say, I don't like that book. If you run webinars, people will say, I don't like this webinar. If you are a coach, people will say, I don't think you're a good coach. The bigger your name and space gets in a given professional space, the more criticism you'll receive. And there's a real opportunity here in the promoting self space to reframe this. We have to remember that the criticism is rarely about you. It's about the other. It's more likely about how the other person feels insecure about themselves, feels fearful about how they're presenting in that given situation. So there's always opportunities for us to say, this is not about me. And we can be fearless about our approach. We can be open to feedback, but confident in our instincts. If we've taken the time to join this call today, and this is such a great example as I'm not sure how many are with us today, but maybe the couple hundred of you on this call today, if you've taken the time to begin being this reflective about how to appropriately communicate, how to respectfully communicate your passions and your skills, I'd invite you to begin feeling very confident about the work that you're getting into, because you've taken the time to think through what it means to be a thoughtful, kind communicator when it comes to promoting yourself. So for this group especially, be fearless about your approach. You're open to feedback. You're ready to learn, but be confident in your instincts. Your instincts led you to this webinar today to get better at communicating. That tells me there's already a wonderful chip in you, a wonderful instinct in you to say, I want to do this correctly, I want to do this right, and I want to be able to talk about my passions specifically. So reframing disapproval is a big piece of this. As you promote yourself, when people disapprove of what you've offered, that is not your fault. It is not your mistake for having shared it. It means you've run into a person whose well is dry. You've run into a person who is maybe not interested in that particular passion, and it's not your responsibility to sort of bring them over to your side. Move on, find a new audience where you can share that same passion again and receive credit for it. Let's dive a little bit into social media. It can be a useful tool, of course, for promoting work and success. And there's different networks out there for different industries. I've mentioned LinkedIn a couple times, and it is important as you begin promoting yourself with ease and confidence to begin building in those spaces. For those of you on this call, if you have not joined LinkedIn or something very similar, I do recommend LinkedIn as a career coach because it is the most powerful network that is not industry specific, at least not in a general setting. So it can be extremely helpful, but it is time to begin building that professional digital presence. It's a huge part of how employers see you. It's a huge part of how you can begin to share your passions and your value. The best LinkedIn pages share not so much about how great you are and what you've done. Many just paste their resume in there. That's a good start, but I'd offer that it's really a place for you to, in free form, describe what you love to do. What are you passionate about? What are you excited about? What energizes you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What's your raison d'etre, right? Your reason for being. Why are you here on this planet to offer something? If we begin our LinkedIn profile on a skills-only approach, we don't give our readers what they're really there for, which is, let me learn a little bit more about Adam before I interview him today. Let me learn a little bit more about Jane before we have this lunch together. We were connected by another colleague. We go to LinkedIn to learn a little bit more. We are, it's a very primal instinct we have to kind of scope out what we're getting ourselves into, whether it's a potential hire, whether it's, again, sort of meeting for lunch or a potential business venture together. Offer your audience, just circling back to knowing your audience for a minute, offer your audience a little bit of what they want, more than is on your resume, more than they can get off of a, let's say a graduate or undergraduate transcript. What excites you? What clubs are you interested in? What associations are you involved with? Are you a member of, IEEE and the local Rotary Club? Are you a member of the 4-H Club? Are you a member of any of these things that can shed a little bit of light on some of your other passions in all different spaces? A really key part of promoting yourself is leveraging this relatively new medium in the last 20 years to say, this is who I am more completely than you'll see in a resume. More job opportunities now than ever before are coming through digital mediums, and there's no going back, right? So gone are the days of looking, some of you on the call will remember this, sort of looking at the job bulletin board in your undergraduate hallway. Gone are the days of, looking at classified ads in newspapers. Jobs are here and gone within moments sometimes on places like Indeed, another great place to build your profile. Monster.com, a good place to build your profile. Leverage that opportunity to fill a gap that exists, which is tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you love to do. A couple final reminders as we go into the space and you leave today thinking about, well, what can I do to promote myself with greater ease and confidence? We've talked about knowing your audience. We've talked about social media. We've talked about reframing disapproval. We've talked about sharing our passions and not just our skills, meaning that we promote our value, not ourself. Be authentic. Promoting talented professionals and colleagues to your network, the more you support others, the more credibility you will enjoy. This is all about generosity. The more we give, and I'm going to, if this webinar audience will allow me, I'm going to get a little bit hippie for a moment on you. We need to give into the universe a little bit here for it to come back to us. And if it helps, you can think about that practically, like I help you, you help me. I'm a little bit more of a believer in put yourself out there and the energy is going to come back to you. Meaning promote others, either solicited or unsolicited. Let people know how great your friend Bob is. Let people know how wonderful Jane is at leading conferences or organizing conferences. Compliment leaders. These are some of the best LinkedIn posts. Just attended a wonderful conference led by Jane Doe. She's an incredible facilitator. Do that unsolicited. Put it out there to promote Jane and watch how that energy circles back to you. Do it over and over again. So we want to demonstrate a generosity of spirit. And while doing all of that, we are truly authentic. It is so easy to tell, as so many of you would probably agree on this call, when someone is not being authentic, right? It might sound something like, or at least when you read it, it sounds like, great conference, it was good to see Mary Jones. This is not as promoting as being specific about someone's skill set. It's not as helpful as it would be to be specific and say, absolutely incredible experience led by the brilliant teacher and facilitator, Mary Jones, who organized the conference for more than 1,000 people. Here are some of those numbers I mentioned earlier, over 3 days in Albuquerque last week. A beautiful example of what Jane is capable of, or something to that effect. The last thing I'll mention here is pretty obvious, but always important to call out: building genuine relationships. The best way to prepare for a time when you need to call upon your network is every day, right? People are more than just connections, and at work and in life, developing genuine relationships pay off. This is where LinkedIn gets a little dangerous. We begin thinking about people as connections, right? And we go on to LinkedIn and we'll see someone who has, 1,000 or 2,000 connections, and at every moment they are connecting with one another. I'll mention two things on this. Number one, of course, people are not just connections. Please think about your professional network in a couple different stages. You, of course, have those who you know personally, those who you have worked with personally, and you connect with them in a very authentic way. There are many, many other people on LinkedIn who are simply simply broadcasting themselves in a very wide way. They're sort of casting a wide net, looking for anyone to connect with in any part of their field. And maybe some of you have gotten these unsolicited requests for support, like, oh, I think you're in this field. Can you connect me to some people, right? And of course, our instinct is typically, no, I don't really know you. I'm not sure that I'm ready to attach my name to yours. Let's at least have a conversation and see where it goes from there, something to that effect. So just remember that we've got to be genuine. We've got to build our genuine relationships. And in order to do that, I'll share the rule that I use. It's up to everyone how they interpret their digital space. I don't connect with anyone on LinkedIn who I have not yet met. And when I say met, I'm including even just we were in a course together where I heard them, discuss their coaching business, or we're in a course together where I studied with them about a certain assessment. It could be that we worked together on a small project for just a month together a couple years ago. All of that's fair game, but I do have a line in the sand for my own profile that says, I'm not going to connect with you unless we have a relationship to build on. I'd offer that this approach allows me to look through my LinkedIn profile, and as I think about who might be connected to someone that I need to talk to, I'm very confident that everyone in my profile is someone that I can say, absolutely, I could reach out to Michelle, I could reach out to Scott and say, hey, would you have 5 minutes to talk about what's possible here? I need to promote myself in this direction. And what happens when we do this, right? Just to kind of bring it back to promoting ourselves with ease and confidence. If I've gone through the trouble of only connecting with people that know me, or at least have some foundation for an in-person relationship with, or I should say at least a synchronous relationship with, that we've connected with directly and engaged with, they may be ready to promote me. They may be ready to say, not only will I connect you to them, Adam, but Michelle says to me, I'll connect you with Scott and tell him how many webinars we've been doing together and how they've been informative and helpful for our organization. So we want to make sure that we're set up to promote ourselves in a very healthy way. There is zero value, and I'll back off that and just say there is very little value. In my mind, it's zero, but I'll soften it in case there's someone out there who disagrees in the webinar. There is very little value in connecting with people that we have absolutely no relationship with. It's difficult to see what role they might play in our space. It's difficult to see what connection or value they might offer when we think about promoting ourselves with ease and confidence. All that to say, please be intentional about how you're connecting and building relationships in the LinkedIn space. So we're right on track here. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. That was just 45 minutes of me talking. So I'm happy to hear your questions. Please use the questions app or the questions application, the little call-out box there at the bottom to share your questions, and I'll start running through them as quickly as I can and getting to as many as I can. Let's see here. Excellent. All right. Let's go up here. Yes, absolutely. So most of them, that's exactly what I was referring to. StrengthsFinder 2.0 from Gallup, New York Times best-selling author of well-being. That's right. Again, usually it's about $14, $15, and a great way. I cannot stress it enough. Maybe the best way I've found as a coach so far to help people begin building language around how to talk about themselves. It's a cheap way. It's a quick way. Even if your interview is tomorrow, I would still recommend going and tracking a copy down and doing it. This isn't something that takes weeks and weeks and weeks. Let's see here. To build my personal brand on LinkedIn, I post about once a week. Great. That's a good amount of posting, Nathan. So too much. Yeah, Andre, I think that's a wonderful routine. So Andre was sharing with the group that he posts about once a week on LinkedIn. Maybe some of us can go check him out and see what he's posting about. And a great use, Andre, of this forum to share that you're doing that. I love it, and promoting yourself in a way that's completely non-confrontational and sharing with others what your approach is. Once a week is a great number. Any more than that, and we'll see people start to drift away and say there's just too much content from the same person. Any less, and it might be considered, well, this isn't someone who's that engaged. I would say the least for someone who, like yourself, Andre, who is looking to be very active in the space, the least you would want to do is once a month, and the most is once a week. So that's kind of the window that I use with clients when I think about building your brand on social media. Let's take a look here. How do you handle competition from others when they tend to press you down? Yeah, it's a great question. So how do we handle, Sanjay, that's a wonderful question. How do we handle competition from others when they intend to press you down? And I'll make a couple of assumptions here, Sanjay, but sometimes what happens is we get into the space where an organization's culture might be very competitive, and others are sharing things in an anti-promotional way about you. They might be saying, well, Sanjay's not that good at this, or Adam's not that good of a coach. I would remind you only to be as authentic as possible and be as consistent as possible in your messaging. Let your work, your value, your passion and skills speak for you. You don't necessarily need to prove yourself to anyone. If you find yourself in an organization that doesn't believe in your passion, that isn't inviting you to share more and invest more in who you are and what you want to do, it might be an opportunity to think about a new place to engage and a new place to let yourself grow as a professional. So what do we do when they start to press us down? Stick to our consistent skill sets. Stick to our consistent story about the value that we offer. We know what's true. We know the things that we've accomplished. We know the things that we've offered. And it's just important to not stray from those. If you're in a situation, Sanjeev, where someone is routinely doing this, it would sound like an unhealthy work environment to be in. I would either consider, taking on just looking to a new space, or talking to the individual directly about what they might like to do to iron out any conflict between you. Yeah, I like this. It's great, Jordan. It's a great tip that you're offering here with your question. Jordan asks, would you also periodically clean out your LinkedIn contacts and not have too many outdated contacts in it? Sure, it's a wonderful practice. I've definitely gone through, Jordan, full disclosure, I've gone through, and I've looked at a name and said, I do not remember this person at all. If I can't figure out relatively quickly where they're from, I will say, let's disconnect for the time being, and move on, because it's not a person that I'd be ready to say, yep, I'm ready to recommend, Jordan to Sanjeev's company so that I can be there. Does your firm coach individuals? Yes, we do. Let's see here. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. People are very kind here, saying thank you. Social media is passive. How to make it active for yourself or your group? Yeah, great question. So as far as talking about how do we make, if I'm not mistaken, how do we make social media more active for yourself or for your group? Andre's offer before, the best way to make social media more active for yourself or your group is to be engaged on social media and be interacting with people. How do we do that? For example, I did a LinkedIn post several weeks ago that had to do with approaches to feedback. And I was offering that a particular feedback style called radical candor is a favorite of mine. Radical candor talks about, and some of you might have been in a recent webinar where I talked about radical candor. It has to do with being courageous and authentic, but also, sending a person a very direct, challenging message while also being kind. And I might offer in that LinkedIn post, here's what radical candor is, and I ask a question. What is your favorite type of feedback, or what is your favorite framework for giving effective feedback? And we want to make sure that we get some engagement online so that, as far to your question, that it is a little bit more active and not just a passive environment where we post something and then we walk away and we never hear from them again. Let's take a look here. 2 questions on. Let's see here. That's a great question. So Trent from Dallas is offering on the graphics on the spectrum that we talked about, where we depict humbleness on one side, or introversion on one side, and more boastful individual on the other. Which side is it best to err on in general? I'm not sure I could say which is best to err on. I know that we can identify both sides pretty quickly as human beings. Our little meters go off. If I was pressed for an answer, Trent, and I'll only answer from my perspective, others on this call might disagree, I would err to the left. That is, I would err towards being a little bit more humble than I need to be, and the opposite. Easier for me to recover from the left than it is from the right. And that's my thinking of the Trent. If I'm initially perceived as a little withdrawn, maybe a little bit too much humility, I know I can come back from that. If I'm perceived as egotistical, arrogant, it's a more difficult place to come back from in an organizational culture often. And second, what about when someone agrees to recommend to a recommendation, but then never delivers on their promise? Yeah, Trent, it's a great question. I'll just say it louder and more clearly for the group. What happens when someone agrees to give you a recommendation, but then they never come through? Yeah, Trent, often that happens, and you just have to move on. You might ask them one more time if you have a good relationship with them and say, hey, Trent, a few months ago you said you might do this. Would it be helpful if I provided a draft? Something like that. You can give them a little boost, Trent, if that's helpful. But this is not it's not too big of a worry. Many of us probably have many places to go for recommendations, any colleagues, even if they're peers. Not necessarily super important that our recommendations come from some high-powered, high-ranking individual, we're ready to receive recommendations from all sorts of people. Again, many of you probably put a good amount of stock in an Amazon review or a restaurant review on. We don't really know who's giving them. We know that in the aggregate, though, we'll get some good information. Let's take a look here. What else is possible? Okay, I want to pull this session. Yeah, thanks so much, Robert. Appreciate that. And I'm not seeing any other questions, Jen. Oh, great. Jennifer's off and Susan Canes were quiet. Yeah, and funny enough, Jennifer, thanks for raising that. It's actually, as I look over at my bookshelf, it's literally, that book is right next to my StrengthsFinder book. So couldn't agree more. You know, Jennifer raises a good point that we don't want to put too much of a stigma around the word introversion, right? We can use that word in a lot of different ways, and today's intent was to share the type of assessment we might make about someone if they don't offer too much of their story, their value, their skill set. We'll label them as an introvert, and that's not necessarily right or wrong or good or bad, but we do want to, you know, move towards the middle of that spectrum where we know that someone is confident, ready to share their value, their skill, their passion, their energy to a group. But a wonderful book about how introverts, and I'll just read right off the binding of the book here, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Thanks for that recommendation, Jennifer. A really good one. As far as offer another question here, sometimes it's very difficult to separate yourself from the achievements you are narrating. Yeah, it absolutely can be. And so we want to make sure that we focus on things like the impact it made, if you need to kind of go one step further as far. So if we want to think about, I did this thing and it really was just me, it's hard to separate. Let's talk about what impact did it make. Did you produce a white paper that spurred a new line of innovation at a certain company? Did you develop a program that allowed 50,000 people better access to, healthcare opportunities? Or did you create a piece of software that allows people to more quickly connect with family members? Whatever the case might be. So think about the impact so far. If you're having trouble saying, I'm not sure how to separate myself, think about, look at the good this thing did that I created, and that really shows the value. So with no more questions, I'll only leave you with one last thought, and it goes back to the last slide I was on. As you think about promoting yourself with ease and confidence, this game, this approach is not about sharing with people how great you are. It's sharing what you love. It's sharing what you're ready for. It's sharing what's next for you, what you're most excited about. The value and the impact that you had can speak for itself, the stories that you can tell, the authenticity that you can bring to them. No one else has that. Only you have those stories. Only you own that white paper you wrote and the impact that it made. Only you can share what it was like to be on that small team that created, the next food preservative or whatever project you were working on. So bring those stories to life when you promote yourself. Ask for those recommendations. Build authentic relationships. Connect with those that you really know, and connect with those that you're ready to not only get a recommendation from, but even give an unsolicited recommendation to. And as we close out the year, and it's a time for all of us to think about the gifts that we have this year, and a time to think about what we're grateful for, I'd offer that a gift you can give anyone else is an unsolicited recommendation before the end of the year. In the next couple weeks, let someone know on LinkedIn or in some public forum how great, how meaningful the work they are is to the team you're on, to the organization that they're serving, to an experience that you had, maybe you attended a conference or something like that with them. Share that with them. Begin to put out into the world, into the universe, a grateful energy about promoting others, and you'll be amazed how quickly it comes back to you. I'm so hopeful that this has been helpful to you. And Michelle and Scott, again, grateful for the opportunity to speak with this wonderful group today. And I look forward to seeing you all in the new year in 2022 on our next topic.
Great. Thank you, Adam, for this very informative presentation. And thank you, everyone, for your great questions. Really appreciate that. Lastly, I wanted to point out that both our distinguished lecture webinars and Build Your Career webinar series are currently in the planning phases. Hopefully, we'll have a schedule ready by end of January 2022. Again, we will be sending everyone slides and the recording for this webinar. Thank you for attending and have a safe and wonderful day. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.